Hi, everyone, and thank you for joining us in our 2024 Government Contracting Summer Shorts Complimentary Webinar Series. First, a bit about Jennifer Schaus and Associates. We are based in downtown Washington, D.C. with a focus on advising established federal contractors. Our clients are companies who sell products, services, or software to the federal government and range from large businesses to mid-sized firms with millions in federal contracts. Separate from our consulting services, we have amassed a subscriber base of 34.7 thousand and our weekly newsletter, The Federal Contractor Weekly. We offer advertising opportunities in the newsletter, including sponsored content newsletters and webinars. If you are interested in reaching federal contractors, please email us and ask for a media kit. Okay, and a bit about the series. As always, our webinars are complimentary and recorded. You can find all of our recordings on our YouTube channel simply by subscribing to it using the link you see on the screen. There is no cost. You can find all of our PowerPoints on the SlideShare site using your LinkedIn credentials to log in. Again, there is no cost. You can find the links to register for this series on our website, jenniferschaus.com, under the Webinars tab. There is a separate registration link for each webinar. Now, some more details about this series. We will be running this webinar series every day at 12 p.m. Eastern Time from Monday, August 12th to Friday, August 23rd, excluding Saturdays and Sundays. Our guest speakers will be covering various GovCon topics and will focus on the areas best practices, common pitfalls, and FAQs. At the end of the webinar, we will open up the floor to questions, so please type them into the control panel and I will read them in the order they are received. They will be read anonymously. Here's a glimpse of our speakers, leading ladies in the federal contracting. Each speaker will cover a hot topic in federal contracting. And here are more images of the ladies you will hear from over the next 2 weeks. Again, please remember, you can find the full schedule and also the recordings on our website under the tab Webinars. For all of our webinars, please hop over to our complimentary YouTube channel. Our webinars are complimentary thanks to our longtime in-kind sponsors. We would like to thank our friends at GovEvents, the premier platform for posting events related to government and government contracting. You can find all of our webinars and our events at govevents.com, as well as recordings from our past 700 plus webinars. We also want to thank Tom Johnson and his team at Set Aside Alert, the go-to publication for contracting opportunities for small women-owned, veteran-owned, HUBZone, and 8A firms. Visit setasidealert.com for more information. Also, the Fairfax County Economic Development Group is a great resource for businesses in Northern Virginia. Please visit their calendar to learn about events and trainings, including this webinar series. Now I want to tell you about our complimentary webinar series on Big Tech in the federal government. Please join us this fall for our Big Tech webinar series. This series will run every Wednesday at 12 p.m. Eastern Time. You can find the registration links on our website under Big Tech. As always, these webinars are complimentary and recorded. We will cover the top 15 big tech companies who sell to the U.S. federal government. This includes household names like Amazon, Facebook, X, Salesforce, and more. We will dig into the data to look at lobbying dollars spent, their special interest, stock price, and how that intersects with their federal contracts. We will dissect their civilian versus defense contract, as well as contract vehicle dollars to include GWACs and GSA schedules. We will also look at their subcontracting dollars. This series is offering a unique sponsorship opportunity. We have heavily discounted this series to a rate of $1,500. This covers the entire series. Sponsor benefits include registration list, ample promo in our newsletter, and LinkedIn. You will also get a sponsor side with 100 words or less write-up about your business. If you're interested, please click on the sponsor link to place your order or send us an email to hello@jenniferschaus.com if you have any questions. The Virginia Apex Accelerator at George Mason University offers free one-on-one counseling to established government contracting firms in Virginia on federal, state, and local procurement topics. If you're interested in learning more, please use the links provided to explore their services, review homework recommendations, register for live training, and find useful links to agencies and other self-directed learning. One-on-one counseling is limited to eligible client companies. Appointment requests are handled in the order they were received and based on counselor availability due to high demand. Online resources and group trainings are free with no restriction on business location. Okay, and let's meet today's speaker. Our speaker today is Dolores Cucina Messina from Rexata, and she will be covering contract management. Dolores, we are so excited to hear your presentation today. I will put myself on mute and turn the floor over to you. Please let me know when you would like to advance the next slide. And as discussed earlier, I will jump back in for questions at the end.
Awesome. Thank you so much. And thank you everyone for joining on this Monday. During your lunch break. It is beautiful outside here in Virginia. I am watching the sun outside of my window and I'm so excited. It finally feels like a really nice, breezy summer. So to have this happen on this day is absolutely perfect. And I'm excited to kick today's session off. If you're not familiar with me, I'm Dr. Dolores Cucino Messina. I am a huge contracts nerd. This is something that I'm very passionate about, so much so I've written my dissertation even on other transaction authorities, wrote a book on it that was published this year. So this is stuff that I live and breathe, and I'm bringing the best practices over to you. So as you're thinking about how to set up your contract management best practices, take some of these pointers. Let me know if you have any questions. Drop them in the chat, and I'll be happy to answer any of them. All right, let's kick it off. Let's go to the next slide. All right, today's topic is contract management. Next slide. All right, we're going to cover best practices. If you're not familiar with contract management, before we get into the best practices, let's baseline everyone. Contract management, when we talk about the practices within the scope, it's from cradle to grave. And what we mean by that is from the moment you're deciding that you might want to bid something to all the way to contract closeout, when you're putting that bow on that contract and you're filing it away for it to either be audited, for you to put it in the, the archive folders, whatever it might be. It is from beginning to end, whether you're government, whether you're industry, state and local, your contract management is really along the entire contract life cycle. Generally, we break it into sections. You may have heard of capture, business development, contract administration itself. You might also know about subcontracting, and all of these topics are going to be covered in these summer shorts. So this is a great way for us to kick it off and talk about some of those best practices where you can keep that in the back of your mind as you listen to the other shorts that are going to happen throughout this month. All right, next slide. All right, the first one is establish a centralized repository. So why is this important? Well, everyone hates having a mismanaged filing system, and it is one of the most stressful things that any company, whether you're small or large, has to deal with. Additionally, making sure that all of your contracts specifically are stored in a secure and easily accessible location is key, because you want to make sure that the right people have access to the contracts. You may not want to give access to everyone on the pricing on the contract. You may only want to give access to programs to know what the statement of work is, while legal has to have access to everything, and finance might only need access to understand how they're supposed to bill the customer. But having the centralized repository is essential for you in case there's an audit, in case when you have to do a contract closeout, or if you're doing internal audits and doing verifications, that's really key, as well as just normal attrition that happens at companies, right? People come, people leave. The worst thing you can do is leave one of these documents in someone's inbox. We've all been there. We've all had to hunt down modifications 16 through 24 or whatever it is in the giant contract that we've been managing. So making sure that they're all saved in one place is going to be really important, and that you have your permissions set correctly there. All right, best practice number 2. Let's go to the next slide. Implement a standardized process. Don't overthink it. This doesn't have to be something where you have to have a standards of operations, or where you have to have a workflow automatically if you're a small business. Know what your process is. You could just start out with bullets. How do you go through creating the contract or initiating the contract, depending on what you're doing, reviewing those terms if they come in, or as you're negotiating, who has approval authority, and then who has signing authority. Why is this important? It's important because that way you know what are the steps of what it's going to take for you to actually fully execute the contract, meaning both parties sign the contract or the agreement within your organization. And this can be a commercial contract, this can be a government contract, whatever it might be, you should have a process. And usually most companies keep the signature authority to different dollar thresholds, so that you're not constantly having to go track down your VPs or your general counsel if it's a small dollar value type of agreement. Sometimes contract managers themselves have signatory authority, so before you're trying to figure out who's supposed to sign it, make sure that you understand what that process is. And then also approval. If there are certain terms that are within the contract that you need general counsel's approval, or business terms where you may have to go to a managing director and ask them if they approve of it, you need to be aware of that as well. The smaller the business, the more centralized it's all going to be. If you're a one-person company, guess what? You're in charge of this whole process, right? But as you grow, there's going to be other people that are going to be helping you through the negotiations. They're going to be helping through the execution of it, and are also going to be helping in managing the milestones, the deliverables, whatever they might be within that contract as well. So as you grow, make sure you're constantly iterating the standardized process and making sure that it makes sense. There's a lot of tools and tips on how to create this process, from LinkedIn blogs to webinars. So if you have questions about that, drop it in the chat. Happy to help. Also, if you're a large business, or if you've been looking at establishing a purchasing system, that would be a really great reference for you as well on what kind of standardized process you could implement with your new company for this contract workflow. All right, next slide. Involve the contracts team early. If I could have fireworks flying right now, or just like a way to emphasize this slide, I would. So just imagine just everything is, bolded on this page. The reason why you want to get your contracts team early is time and time again, you hear of people saying it's in contracts, it's delayed. Why does that happen? It's because contracts did not get involved early generally. During the capture process or the business development process, where you're writing the proposals or where you're seeking out specific solicitations you want to bid on. And getting contracts involved is super beneficial because they can help you with the assumptions, clarifications, exemptions language. They can help look at your pricing. They can help look at the terms. They can even see, were you even supposed to bid this in the first place? Maybe there's a compliance situation that you were not aware of, and now you have to know how to deal with it. So getting contracts involved early is really important. Additionally, to help expedite the negotiations process. Why is that important? Well, because business to business, we start making certain deals, right? We start having conversations about the statement of work. How are we going to deliver? What are we going to do? Don't start that process without having that conversations with your contracts team. You don't want to overpromise something to someone that cannot be delivered by your organization. And contracts has a visibility over everything that goes on in the company, because they're going to see all of the contracts within that team or that one individual. So they'll be able to tell you, is this something you've done in the past? Is this something new? Are they asking, is the new client asking for something reasonable? What if it's outside of the range? What if that person doesn't, that delivered that product or service is no longer there, and you've been waiting to fill the position for 6 months? That is something contracts is going to be aware of in most organizations. So getting them involved is really key. The other piece is mitigating risk. When things get spicy, right, during contract negotiation, especially when you're talking about how you're going to execute it. So there's always one or two terms that are going to create a little bit of concern, whether they're too fuzzy or too specific. Getting contracts involved to make sure that the language is clear and documented correctly in the negotiation file is really, really important. And it will also help optimize the contract terms for that situation and for that time. Things change over time, and people come and go. Contracts will be able to have that repository that you can go back and you can reference and say, hey, why did we do this project this way? Why did we sign this contract? We've never signed it this way. We've never executed this type of scope of work. Why did we agree to this? Your contracts team should be able to answer that based on their files and based on what they have saved in their negotiation file, to say, oh, well, the reason why we did this is because Bob, our previous VP of so-and-so, approved this type of scope of work, and it was very early on when we were testing, this type of capability, or something like that. There's going to be some kind of documentation that follows it, and that's going to be key. So remember to involve your contracts team early in the process. Next slide. Best practice number 4, leverage technology. And I don't just mean artificial intelligence or large language model. I know that's on top of everyone's thoughts nowadays. It's like, how do we optimize this using technology? I'll make it even simpler for you. Use a contract management software to automate your tasks, track deadlines, improve visibility. What does that mean? If you are using some kind of system other than a spreadsheet, I know we love our spreadsheets, but this is really, really beneficial if you're able to build out a contract management system out of either your Salesforce, your HubSpot, whatever you might be using You might be using some kind of other like BD tools that are helping you track your contracts. Leverage that technology. Why is it important? Because as you have that centralized location of all your contracts and you have proper documentation, you have your contract briefs ready to go, this technology aspect is going to help get you past the do I remember when we have to report versus, hey, here's a reminder, don't forget you have 17 contracts that require for you to go in and do Service Contract Act reporting. Rather, you going into your spreadsheet and hoping that somebody documented it correctly, or that the pivot table worked, or that the macro worked correctly, you're able to go in and you're able to track that information down. The other thing is that if there's an approval process that you have in your company where you have that, for example, the different approvals that we talked about or signature authority, you can track to date when someone approved it, any kind of comments. What is the revenue stream? When is the renewal? The worst thing you could do is miss a renewal deadline, especially if you has to be authorized to auto renew by written agreement or by email or something, and now you have a terminated agreement and now you have to work through that. Or better yet, you have a teaming agreement and you forgot to check in to see, when is the expected win date? When is the expected award date of the solicitation you bid on as a team, and you forgot to follow up, a subcontract never came. Now what? Now you have a terminated teaming agreement, you don't have a subcontract, and you missed out on business. Things like this happen. This is why technology is going to play a vital role here, and also during reporting and an audit. So if you're doing contract closeout, if you have an audit that comes in, if there are questions from your leadership asking you specific data points on your contracts that you already have, being able to run a query in a software is going to save you a ton more time than you trying to dig those documents up. The more and more contracts you have, the more and more the need for you leveraging technology is going to play a role in this. All right, next slide. Regularly review and update. Remember, we are all human, okay? So we might miss something. We might miss a specific update. We might miss a modification. We may have inherited a contract or agreement that we forgot to open the file up when we received it. And now we're at contract closeout and we realize we're missing 5 or 6 modifications, or something wasn't invoiced, or we missed a deadline on a report. Always review. The best thing to do is do an internal audit. Maybe once a year is a great practice for you just to check the information. Is everything accurate? Does everything pan out? Does something look wonky in what you have? Do a random audit. Every time someone new starts, have them review certain contracts that they have for completeness. Fresh eyes help so much. I was working at one organization, just to give you an example, and they didn't know that some of their clients wanted to be billed every other week versus every single month. And so we caught that, we fixed it, obviously. But if you're not checking it repeatedly and you're assuming that the terms are consistent across the board, you may already be falling behind. So making sure that you're regularly reviewing and updating, and if you have a software, running those reports, running those queries, doing those audits is going to be essential. All right, next slide. Avoiding pitfalls. All right, we want you all to be successful. We want you all to do great things and dominate this topic of contract management when you walk away from today, or at least be a little bit more curious about it. So let's talk about what are some pitfalls. Next slide. Lack of clarity. So vague language or poorly defined terms can lead to misunderstandings. If there is a term in your contract, meaning a word, in your contract or agreement that you're using repeatedly that is capitalized, make sure that it is defined. Make sure it's defined in a paragraph, it's defined in the definition section of your contract. Make sure you understand what it means. Typically, there are standard terms like disclosure, recipient that have similar meaning, but even then, making sure you have those definitions is really important. Vague language. Making sure that you and the other party understand what specific paragraphs in your contract mean. Usually what I see is this vague language appears in your statement of work, or in a disputes clause, or in something that is process driven, because you get stuck in the negotiations and then you decide to defer it to another conversation, and then it never gets clarified. So making sure that even if you're keeping the language somewhat broad within the agreement or vague, you have somewhere documented, whether it's an email in your negotiation files somewhere, what you meant by that and what process you were going to follow, or when you were going to follow up and modify it. Typically, you'll see a lot of vague language in development work or research and development, because you're creating something you don't know what it's going to look like at the end, but you should be always working towards clearer terms. A perfect contract or a perfect agreement is only one modification away. So if something doesn't look right or you missed something before, you can always modify it, walk the other party through it, and make sure you both understand that language. All right, next pitfall. Overlooking key details. So failing to address important clauses can have some risks. We've all been there, okay? We've all been there where your management is telling you that this is a priority, that you have to make sure that this is signed within 24 hours. You're looking at, a 30-page agreement with 6 attachments, and you're thinking, all right, fine, if we have to push this through, we need to make sure that we kind of just rush through all of these things and push this to signature as fast as possible. Wrong. You don't want to do that. You want to take a step back and you want to think through, okay, what are the main terms that we want to make sure that we are protected with? Typically, you want to look at your termination rights. Is there mutual termination, or is it only one-sided? Look at your dispute resolution. How are you going to be handling any disputes? What if invoices are late on payment? What if there's some kind of clause in there for compliance? Maybe you didn't see that for whatever reason there might be a cybersecurity requirement that has never applied to your type of work. I have even seen where people have missed the Federal Acquisition Regulation clauses in other transaction agreements. It happens. We miss these, we rush through it because we have the pressure. Try to slow down, even if you do have the pressure of someone telling you have to rush it, because you don't want to miss these clauses. It is very hard for you to go back and to update your warranty, your limitation of liability, your indemnification, your termination, your dispute resolution, anything with invoicing, because all of that usually in most organizations has to go through either legal or executive leadership. So just make sure you're looking out for what terms you need to make sure you're checking off, and if you have a process, you follow it. All right, next slide. Inadequate tracking, losing track of contract deadlines. You know what? None of you will get into this pitfall because you're doing the best practice and you have that software or that technology that's helping remind you of when those deadlines are. You know exactly what contracts have manpower reporting. You know exactly what contracts have Service Contract Act. You know where you need to maybe update some of your information in case things have changed, because you are doing best practices. But if this is something that you haven't generally had before, make sure that expert in having a good tracking system. So this is a pitfall that a lot of people aren't going to fall in. But I'm not sure where I got caught off, but what was the last thing that you heard?
Might be good to jump in the middle of this year.
Okay, perfect. So inadequate tracking, one of the things that you want to make sure is that you're tracking which clauses are in your contract or agreement that have some kind of action. So your reporting clauses, anything that has your milestones, deadlines, anything that has a timeline of notifications or a renewal or something like that. If you're not tracking that somewhere, even if it is a spreadsheet, you need to make sure that you are looking at it and not missing those deadlines. It can cause some legal issues. It can cause penalties, especially if you miss that federal reporting that we all have to do in October. So if you have clauses like that, go back, check it, make sure you're not, that you don't have some kind of requirements that you're not meeting at the time. All right, let's go to the next pitfall. All right, ignoring red flags, overlooking warning signs. This is a great area where a lot of us tend to miss the red flags, especially during negotiations. If you're having negotiations, even in the beginning, when you're negotiating a non-disclosure or a teaming agreement, whatever it might be, see how the other person is willing to work with you. If you're having a hard time getting through some of the simplest terms, meaning your statement of work, or like you're requesting clarification on a defined term and they're not providing it for you, it might be a red flag. If they're telling you, for example, here we're sending you this contract, we don't want to make any edits to it, please just proceed. That's going to be a red flag, because that means that they're trying to move you as fast as possible and also are not willing to necessarily work with you in negotiations. So make sure that you're tracking that, you're pushing through that, and you're letting your leadership know and your contracts team know what you're experiencing if you're on the program side or on the operational side, so that they can keep track of that. All right, let's go to the next pitfall. Not seeking legal counsel. This is key. So failing to consult your lawyer when dealing with, high value contracts or even risks that you might not be aware of, making sure that they have approval over the template that you're using, making sure that it's compliant is going to be really, really important. So keep track of this. Make sure you know that your legal counsel is experienced in both public procurement law and in corporate law, or have one of each, whatever it might be, but you have someone that you can turn to that can help. Okay, I think we got through all the pitfalls. 2 minutes to go for Q&A. Are there any questions? All right, what is contract management? Contract management is the process of managing contracts from creation to execution. Remember, it's that cradle to grave that we talked about, and making sure that you know how to maximize the value out of the contract through the terms, and making sure that you're getting paid for that statement of work, or your company's getting paid. Next slide. Why is it important? It's important to mitigate risks. It's important for you to make sure that your company is able to be profitable off of the contract, and making sure that you're protecting your organization from any risk, and ensuring the efficiency of everyone working well together within the bounds of the contract, that there's no nasty scope creep. Next slide. What are the key stages? So we have contract creation. This is where you decide that there's a need or there's a request in order for someone to sign a contract with you. Negotiations, approval, meaning everyone has signed off that needs to sign off that it can go to signature. Execution, this is where everybody signs. And then you have your monitoring or contract administration. And then near the end, you have your renewal termination, which generally starts off for federal contracting, a contract closeout process. Next FAQ. What are the benefits of using contract management software? I know we already talked a little bit about this, but automating your tasks, improving visibility, and then reducing any risks, and making sure that you have transparency across the organization as to what is within the contracts that your company has. Next. How can I improve my organization's contract management process? So remember, think about the best practices that are out there. We definitely did not have the overall comprehensive, but we did go over some really good high-level ones. You can get more technical depending if you're commercial, state, local, or federal, or international contracts. There's a lot of best practices that apply to each. Leveraging technology so that you're working smarter, not harder, is going to be key. And then communication. Communication is number one. If you're starting to feel a little like spicy, or things are getting a little heated in your discussions with your client or with your partners, take a pause, walk away, regroup, take that 24-hour break before sending that email, making sure that you have effective communication and you focus on the problem and you don't focus on the people, making sure that you're working towards that solution. All right, next slide.
Okay, we're gonna open up the floor to questions now. I'm going to start reading these off. Okay, can we receive the slides? Yep, the slides are going to be posted on our SlideShare site, and you will receive the link. What contracts management software do you recommend for the contract workflow from the beginning to end? Is there a great software that also tracks contracts, modifications, and/or escalation?
So there's a ton of software solutions, and I'm not going to promote just one because depending on your company size, you may need um, different capabilities than others, but a lot of them can be customized for what you need. I've worked out of an Access database a long time ago as one of the first contract management systems that I helped build. I've worked out of HubSpot, been able to create a pipeline there so that you can track all the proposals all the way to contract award. Have been able to modify even Salesforce in order for you to have, again, from the opportunity start gate all the way to contract closeout to reporting, and being able to modify that you have to have really good consultants for both of those systems in order for you to be successful. There's definitely a ton of Deltek products that are out there. There's Federal Compass, that's a BD software that you can use that also has capabilities for you to track opportunities and contract award and then modify it to what your internal needs are. So I would say before choosing a specific software for your organization, see what you actually want to track and what you want to see based on the number of contracts that you have, and then see what your budget is, because a lot of the customization takes into account how much time consultants will spend on it. But you can modify almost anything to your needs, and you can automate that, whether you build it internally or whether you buy a software somewhere else.
Okay, is there a better software that can track everything from proposal to contract award to client billing?
The most comprehensive one that I've ever worked with is Salesforce, but it did take a lot of customization. Additionally, it also took a lot in training everyone to use it. So having high adoption and buy-off from your organization is going to be essential for it to be successful.
Is this recorded? Can we review the recording later? I can answer this one. Yes, this session is recorded and you can find it on our YouTube channel. What are some of the most popular contract management softwares used in the IT GovCon space?
I think you can use the same ones that I referenced earlier. There's a ton of them out there, and depending on what you're using for business development, a lot of times you can customize those to meet your contract management needs as well.
Okay. Last call for questions here. Okay, great. I'm not seeing any more coming in. Okay. Thank you again, Dolores, for such a great presentation, and thank you to everyone for joining us for our GovCon webinar series. Today's webinar can be found on our YouTube channel within 24 hours, and the slides are always on our SlideShare site. As a friendly reminder, our Big Tech and Webinar Federal Contracting webinar series this fall, there will be 15 webinars, 15 Wednesdays. All webinars are free to attend. Please take advantage of our heavily discounted sponsor rates to get in front of federal contractors. Okay, thanks again for attending. Catch the replay on our YouTube, and if you are watching, please leave us a comment, like a video, and subscribe to our channel. Thank you, everyone.